Hey there, blockheads. It's Taylor Martin from Pewaukee Lake Sailing School. We're in Pewaukee, Wisconsin today to take a look at an Opti and do a run through of things that you should check out on your boat before you get out on the water. So we're going to start all the way up here at the bow. The first thing you want to check at the bow is your bow line and how it's tied onto the boat. Your bow line should go all the way to your mast step and through this loop here at the bow. And really you want to make sure that your bow line is long enough and that it's not knotted up if you had some knots tied in it from the last time you were on the water or on the dock. Run through your bow line, make sure that it's not tangled, any of that sort of stuff. Makes anybody giving you a hand their life easier. While we're up here, you want to take a look at your mast step as well and make sure that your mast step is still in your boat. These mast steps pop out from time to time. There's a lot of load on these mast steps in your boat. Way underneath where we can't see right now, we have the bottom of the mast step. And that you're adjusting based on your wind and that sort of thing. So you are playing with this a little bit more than other parts of your boat. So you should have a good sense of whether or not it's still functional. But putting your hands down there to make sure that it's still seated in the boat and that it's still adjustable is good to do before you get on the water. Now on the Opti, it's a pretty simple boat, but most of what's going on is sail ties. A lot of knots tied all over the boat. And whether you're racing every day and untying your sail ties and retying them, or sailing a club boat where you're unfolding the sails and not checking the sail ties, make sure that they're all still attached, right? We should have a whole lot of these sail ties on the mast and the boom tied on with square knots. Make sure that none of them are missing, none of them are loose. And for you racers, this is something you should check every day. And for you club sailors, you want to make sure that your sail is still going to stay attached to your boat. Same is true for your sprit halyard and all the knots on your sprit halyard. Double check all these knots and all this line here and make sure that where the knots go through blocks or where the line goes through blocks, those blocks are still good, still serviceable. There's not sand, salt, any of that sort of thing in any of those blocks. As we move down the mast, we have a couple of cleats for our sprit halyard and for our vang. And you want to make sure that these, whether they are tapped and screwed into the mast or riveted, that they're still attached. Make sure that they're still seated. And we've got one here that's a little bit loose that I noticed. And if you notice something like this, make sure that you get right on that. Could pop off while you're sailing and then you don't have your cleat. You also want to check your gooseneck fitting. These plastic fittings can get loose or crack. You want to keep an eye on those before you get out on the water. Moving a little bit back in the boat, we have our airbags, our flotation, which is super key to check before you get out on the water. You want to make sure that those are fully inflated, like the one back here is, and that they're holding air before you go out on the water. You also want to make sure that these straps that hold the flotation in there are not worn through, that they're not going to pinch on the bag, and that they're still attached to the bottom of the boat. They're just screwed in, so checking on those screws every once in a while is important. Checking your Daggerboard bungee. You also want to keep an eye on this guy. Bungee does wear out in the sun and the salt and the wind and all that sort of stuff. Gets UV damaged pretty quickly. So take a look at your bungee before you go out to keep that Daggerboard down and in position. You also want to check all of your blocks on your main sheet and your main sheet itself. Make sure that it is not worn through any place it goes through a block. Make sure that where it's tied or shackled to your boat, those knots and those shackles are still fully attached. And other than that, you want to check your last piece of hardware, which is your rudder, and make sure a couple of things here, that your clip that holds your boat in or holds your rudder to your boat is still attached and still good. These are just held on by screws. Sometimes these get a little bit loose. As long as these screws aren't missing, these clips tend to be a little bit loose from time to time, and that's not a major concern. Also want to check again your universal. Any boat that you sail that has a tiller and tiller extension, you're going to want to keep a close eye on these universals. Again, a rubber piece that can break down pretty quickly. Other than that, your hiking straps are the last piece back here, kind of with that airbag. They're screwed into the boat, so make sure that they're still attached wherever they're on the boat, and make sure that your straps are still padded, are still good on your feet, are still safe to use when you're on the water.